Welcome back, everyone. This is a special episode on the AgView pitch, and many of you may be listening to it elsewhere. Today, you have Shay, Foulk, and Chris Barron actually being interviewed by Ben Gordon. And Chris, I think Ben hit us repeatedly, and then he put me in a chokehold in order to make sure that we had this conversation lined up. But we've had a great opportunity to get to know Ben here over the last few years on the work that he's doing in the egg space. He's had an opportunity to work with a lot of the clients and a lot of the great farm operations across the U.S. and Canada that we have. So, Ben, I'm gonna let you take lead on this conversation and look forward to wherever it takes us today.
Yeah, no, it's we've been looking forward to this one for a while, and I think when you were on with Vance Crowe, I think you had a provocative statement that he got into about like in 10 years what's going to happen, and I'm going to paraphrase so that way if it's wrong and pisses anyone off, they can blame me, not you. But it was, some farmers will be paying double in interest than other farmers in 10 years because the state of finance will change.
Mm.
And, that was a very, very interesting thing to Vance, to me, and to others. I know when you guys had us on at the AgView Summit, we talk about where the land market's going to be in 10 years. And what I really wanted to get a chance to do is, one, as a listener to your podcast, force you guys to reintroduce yourselves, because sometimes if maybe they're new, they actually don't know exactly who you guys are, and just like the simple personal for each of you. And then two, I want to talk about what we've learned from your experiences at AgView over the last 10, and then where do we think, what is a farm going to look like in 2035? And then, maybe some tactile steps of how to get there and how you guys play into that. And so maybe Shay, I might ask you to start because maybe I'll have Chris give kind of the AgView story after you kind of lead off.
Yeah, so your introduction there, I'm gonna hit on that in a minute as far as the interest rates comment, because I think that's probably why a lot of people are interested in listening to this one. But I am located in north central Illinois, so north of Peoria, about 30 minutes. I am a Iowa native, so grew up in Chris's area. I grew up just south of Waterloo, Iowa, in a small town called LaPorte City. Went to Iowa State University for agronomy. I met my beautiful wife, Hannah, at an agronomy event out in Nebraska. She's from Illinois, and the rest is history, as they say there. Immediately after college, I joined the United States Army, spent 5 years with the 75th Ranger Regiment out of Savannah, Georgia, deployed twice to Afghanistan. And in 2019, we had the decision of, what do we do next? And I had joined with specific intentions and purposes of what I wanted to do in the military and had a couple great deployments. I was able to accomplish those things. And we decided that there was an opportunity with family in Illinois, Hannah's parents' farm operation and seed business, and also an opportunity to come on with Chris and Lissa, my mother, with the AgView Solutions team. So we came back in 2019, and I started kind of doing a blended program to see what worked from a time commitment requirement on the farm, the seed business, and the consulting. And it all just clicked. It came together very naturally. And what I found, I'd grown up around the farming piece, but what I found interesting is the seed and the consulting came very naturally to me. It's interesting, it's engaging, it is purposeful, and it gives us an opportunity to have tremendous impact with the operations that we work with. So what that looks like today, Chris has been doing this for 3 decades. And as we move into the next decade, we're going to focus a little bit on what does 2035 look like. 2035 we'll see myself and my wife Hannah taking over the AgView Solutions team, the network of associates that we've built, allowing Chris and Alyssa to do just more of the things that they want to do, and maybe facilitate some peer groups and do some traveling and still be involved on the AgView side. But that's our strategic outlook, and that's where I'm located. So I'll turn that over to Chris, and then I'll hit on your interest rate comments there.
So yeah, I'll just give you a quick little background. I grew up in Northeast Iowa, so where we're still at today. I actually live where I grew up. We kind of decided to settle here. Alyssa and I were married in 2015, have a blended family. Shay is our oldest. We have and Shay always laughs at me when I'm trying to name off all the kids, because when you have eight kids, it's like trying to remember them all and not forgetting one of them, and especially the daughter. Because the last time I was on a podcast, I I forgot to mention Amelia. And she's like, well, you mentioned all the boys and you didn't mention me, you know? So I'm going to make sure I mention Amelia, and then I'm going to make sure she watches this podcast and understands that she's my favorite. And I introduced her, and I'll leave all the other boys out of it. So anyway, we have a great family. Really blessed to have kids that are interested in agriculture. We also have some kids that were military besides Shay, that were in the Marines, and we've got police officers and FBI agents and all kinds of stuff. So I feel pretty safe when we have a family event going on. I got lots of protection around. But on the farm side, basically grew up in a hog operation. First 20 years of my life, I was just basically a pork producer. My family operation had a Pioneer Sales Agency since 1972. I embarked in that for about 7 years and started working with customers and started looking at their financials. And I didn't want to just sell them seed. I wanted to understand their entire business. That led to an opportunity with Farm Journal Media. Started writing some blogs for them. After I had told them I got D's in English, and they said that's fine. We still want you to write, you know. So I wrote for blogs for them, and then I started writing for Top Producer magazine, and then that kind of led to me starting to work with more clients and just helping farm operations. And I got out of selling seed directly and just started actually working with farm operations. You know, back in the mid 90s is really when I started really helping farm operations, you know, from a cost production perspective. And as that developed, we started to learn that essentially you can get all the numbers right, but people can really screw stuff up when we can't get along and we can't communicate and we don't do all the things that we need to do. And so I started to realize that maybe when I went to college and got a degree in communications and psychology, it was actually a good thing to study in college. I didn't study finance, although that was what I was working on with people, you know, but I learned that the hard way in the 80s as a kid growing up in a farm that we barely made it through the 80s. I mean, there was a lot of issues and a lot of financial struggle. And that's what gave me the passion for wanting to help people on the financial side of things. But like I said, we started to realize that, you can get all the numbers right, but people are what makes things work. And so, fast forward to today, it's a very important part of our business on the consulting side as AgView, is putting peer groups together and letting operations learn from each other. And facilitating those is really, I think, a key thing that we do. The other thing I would say about that differentiates AgView is all five of us as facilitators and as consultants, we all farm as well. And so we really care, we're farmers trying to help farmers. I think that differentiates us a little bit. We also, I think, care a lot that the legacies of these farm operations go on to the next generation. It's a super, super important thing to us. And then I think the other thing too that we do is we're not trying to go super wide as a business. We're trying to go deep. And I just had a conversation with a family operation this morning where I explained that to them. I said, we're not going to try to work with 15,000 farm operations or 5,000 even. We're going to work with people who need us and where our skill set matches their needs. And we're going to go deep. We're going to understand the family dynamics. We're going to understand all of these things because a lot of us in farm operations have this strategic resource team, which includes typically your attorney, your CPA, your lender, your insurance agent, a financial planner, advisor. And we show up and try to be the transmission fluid, right? We try to help connect the dots and help farm operations work more effectively and have a better contextual understanding of what they're trying to accomplish. And I use the transmission fluid as an analogy. I mean, anybody listening here, take the transmission fluid out of your tractor and see how far you get. I mean, you have to figure out how you navigate and make sure that all of your pieces of the puzzle of that whole transmission work together and that the gears match and that they understand each other. And so that's kind of where we see and kind of my objective and our objective as AgView is helping people really make their business thrive.
And what I want to add to that too, the gears analogy, I think is really good because timeline wise, when I came back into the AgView Solutions team, what I helped develop was processes and procedures. So Chris has the art of the people element, the psychological outlook. And what I saw was in order to replicate that, you have to like build out pieces of it. And I know we're going to hit on systems here in a little bit, Ben. So I wanted to mention that the way we're able to facilitate all those things that Chris said, the team health, the cost of production, the peer groups, is because we have processes and procedures in place that has allowed us to add associates, to add the right team members, to grow and better service the people that we work with on the consulting side. And what the last comment that I have on that for the people listening to this to remember is Chris and I, and it's easy for anybody in a facilitator or in a leadership role to forget that sometimes the most basic thing, the most foundational truths that we hold are the first time someone has ever heard those things. So Chris has been doing it for 30 years. I've been doing it 7 years now, 6, 7 years now. I may think that, oh, taking this government program and tying it to a per bushel basis as part of your income, that, yeah, everybody knows that. But I just had a conversation the other day. The guy heard me on AgriTalk and he's like, that is really smart. I didn't, he goes, and it's so simple. And I don't know why I never thought of it, but I didn't. And it's important to remember that when we're working with farm operations or ag businesses or whoever the client is, that we have a practical approach to that, that it might be the first time that they're hearing these things. And that's what brings the value, I guess. So Ben, I'll shut up and turn it over to you here.
I want to
Well, no,
say, I want to say something real quick too, just to give Shay kudos is that it's 100% right because I struggled for a number of years. And the reason I want to mention this is because it correlates a lot with a lot of people listening in farm operations and how do I grow? How do I scale? And I kept wondering, like, how do I teach somebody what's taken me 15 or 18 years to learn how to do effectively to help people, to ask the right questions, to help them build out their business structure, to help them think about a collaborative opportunity, to help them think differently about their business. And I was like really struggling with how do I like replicate this? And I know a lot of farmers do that a lot of times. It's like nobody can do it as good as me. I'm doing it. I have to do everything. Well, you don't have to do everything. You have to figure out what you do well and let somebody else do the other stuff. And that's exactly what I did when Shay came in is it was pretty obvious with his military background and his education of building systems. You build this out. I'm just going to be a facilitator. I'm going to be a consultant. You build all these systems out and we'll start to add team members that can do the same thing and replicate what we're doing. But that was not a core competency of mine. And so I think that's the correlation there for farmers listening to this is a lot of times it's like, how do I grow the business? Well, sometimes you got to figure out what you do and figure out where the areas are that your skill sets aren't as good and fill those in and understand that bringing more people into the business is not an expense, it's an investment. And I think a lot of times as farmers, we think that when we bring people into the operation, we look at it as an expense. And I always argue that if you bring the right people in, it's an investment, no different than buying a tractor or a combine or another tool to improve your effectiveness. But now I'll shut up, but I wanted to throw that in there.
I love this because usually I can't you can't like when I'm listening to the podcast, I can't get you guys to talk enough. So like this is like the right mix that I was going for here. One thing I've noticed working with a lot of folks who you guys work with is just learning velocity, and I would say AgView folks are not normal, and that's a compliment from me. So maybe where I want to go is like especially over the last we'll just call it 10 years because we're going to talk the 10 years forward, but what I want to do is just quickly just go like those biggest learnings, and maybe Chris, I'll have you kind of drive on this of just like what have been some of the biggest changes that you've seen from the AgView crowd. I don't actually care about the broad market as much here. From you learning your farm and what your farmers have learned, what have been the biggest changes that you think are going to inform going forward, and then we'll talk a little bit about what that future looks like.
Interesting that you asked that question. I just did a podcast specifically on that on our 19 minutes podcast, but I went down and I'm starting to, I used to be the young guy in the room and now I'm the old guy in the room. And I was sitting there thinking one day, what are some of the things, exactly the question you just asked, what are some of the things that we've observed that people have done to make their businesses more successful, is kind of paraphrasing what you
Give us
asked.
the teaser then, and then you have to
Yeah.
go to 19 minutes on it to get the full Chris Barron
Well,
overview.
I'll give you the list, but really it's the operational efficiencies that have really changed, technology and the adaption of it and the ability to operate it correctly. And that comes right back to what I said earlier, is delegating that stuff off. I mean, in my farm operation, I'm the last one they're going to want to calibrate anything, to set up any of the technology stuff. I ask them what buttons not to push so I don't screw stuff up, but I can still operate things, right? So it's making sure that you have somebody on the team that keeps you fresh and keeps you current with all of the new technology, not necessarily on the bleeding edge, but on the leading edge, keeping, staying on top and um, being really aggressive to change, not resisting it, but like being on that front edge, but but understanding the difference between the bleeding edge and the leading edge, right? And so I think that's really important. The other one I think is the financial information. I know Joe Paulson just did a podcast, A Dad's Wisdom, with a guy, and they were talking about the 80s. And one of the things that hit me there, which was one of the things I talked about in the 19 minutes, is that the adoption of knowing your numbers. And I don't, and that's such a overused phrase. What I mean by that is understanding your numbers. There's a difference, right? And so it's the people that actually put their data together themselves, and they don't necessarily expect somebody else to do it. Now they may have people putting the reports together and stuff, but it's analyzing it correctly and making the best decision from that data and from that information. And you do have to have a little bit in that where you're putting the data in. So like with Profit Manager, we have a lot of things where you have to, it feels like you got to do the math. It's kind of like when you're a kid in school and they said, you got to do the work, you got to show your work. Well, when you do that, you have a better understanding of where the numbers are coming from. So you have a better pulse. So that's the other one, is just understanding the financials. I think the
And Chris, I'm
mindset.
just going to for those of you who don't follow AgView normally, Profit Manager is a tool that they have that actually allows you to break out crop budgeting, cost of production, essentially do a lot of this financial analysis, one-time fee, and then you get a little bit of extra support from these guys. But just in case there's some new folks that aren't as familiar, sorry to interrupt you.
No, I appreciate that. Just two other things that are kind of big observations. The other one's just mindset. It's the attitude that you have. Whenever we go through a trough, I always start to see people start to create this scarcity mindset. I'm going to do a podcast on that at some point.
Hmm.
Is where I can't do this because times are bad, or I can't, I shouldn't do this. Whenever we do a Dad's Wisdom, the one common theme we always hear is, I wish that I've taken on more risk. I wish that I've done this. I wish I've done that. And the scarcity mindset is really damaging to growth of the business. And so I think it's those who run the numbers and they look at opportunities and they attack them, and they're willing to take some risk. Because if you don't take that risk, you will never grow. And so you got to be willing to do that. And those who have done that, I've watched them time and time again grow the business. And then the last one is is really understanding how to manage opportunities and how to take advantage of them. And it's looking for them. If you sit around and wait for stuff to show up, it's never gonna. It's getting out and meeting people. It's being in front of people. It's interacting in the community. It's doing all those things, and I see that with operations that are willing to do that, or even get outside of their area, and that's where the peer groups come in, and just learning from other people. Because sometimes I think in agriculture we are on our own island, and when we I call it backyarditis always, but it's like you see what's going on in your area, and it freezes you from the next level that you could get to, because you're restrained by your boundaries. Open up those boundaries and look for those opportunities and take advantage of them. And those are just observations of people that I've seen be super successful by virtue of just some of those observations.
Yeah, I think those resonate. I think just, I'd almost sum a bunch of those into, there's some just harsh number realities, and then there's kind of the people realities. And the biggest people one almost there is openness, learning velocity, willing to develop, because of the harsh economic reality that we face is we're in a commodity business. And if
Mhm.
you look at any other commodity business, low cost producer who can scale wins. But we know that scale isn't the only answer in agriculture because we're growing these things and you can't lose that like per unit efficiency. So
Mhm.
that all resonates quite a bit.
Yeah, and I would add to that too. One last thing to your point, just to kind of add to that, is the diversification of profit centers and
Hmm.
understanding the financial diversity within the business and what's paying the bills and what might be costing you. And I think measuring that accurately has been really key because I think the diversification kind of went away for a while. It's kind of coming back now a little bit to where some diversification in the business, I think, is a key thing, but I think it really has to be measured with your core competencies of everybody on your team too, as to, because you can also do too much, so it's figuring out what that right amount is.
So if that's kind of where we've been, I maybe want to pivot a little bit, and Shay, you can kind of build on that and the go forward. So you've been looking over the last, been in it in the last 6 years after I'll call it a break, even though we know it wasn't a break, but we'll say a perspective shift from a different intersection in working with agriculture indirectly, given the makeup of the country you're in. What are you seeing? Like if you think of those trends, what's going to accelerate? What is going to be more of the same but at a different magnitude, or what do you think will be different? And maybe what I want to do is maybe we'll kind of popcorn back and forth on the where things are going back and forth between you, just so we kind of keep it conversational.
So I think what we saw over the last 5 years that's going to be accelerated in the next 10 years is the ability to capitalize in downturns.
Mm.
Meaning, when I look at the time period that I came back, low economic prices, still some returns, trade wars, the amount of money that we've pumped into the economy over the last I mean, we quadrupled the amount of money that's in the system in 5 years. There is going to be massive potential to capitalize on as we're in this current downturn. And the operations we've worked with over the last 10 years are the ones that are going to accelerate that in the next 10 years because they took advantage of it this last go around. They saw 2% interest rates and they said, hell yeah, let's refinance everything we can. Let's get 24 to 36 months of working capital on a short-term note. Let's go out and make purchases that make sense. Let's roll our equipment fleet before prices go crazy. And some of that's luck and some of it is planning. Chris always talks about luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And that is what I think we're going to see out of the successful people listening to this podcast over the next 10 years. And I think it's going to be at a staggering rate. The clients that we work with, if they would sit down today in 2025 and take inventory of what they've done since 2020, I think it would be quite an eye opener for them. And I think the last thing I'll say on that is if you either haven't worked with us or feel that you haven't had that velocity of growth you've been looking for in your business, go through the same exercise and be like, what did I miss out on? And could an advisor or could someone as an outside facilitator in our operation have pointed that out and helped us through that? And I'm not saying it's AgView. I'm not saying it's the mindset behind it that we need advisors, we need peers, we need the right people surrounding us to make those decisions. So that's my feeling, Chris. I guess I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think moving forward, to kind of tee off of what you said and the question that Ben had here is the fact that, you know, labor is one of the key things I think that a lot of times gets brought up but gets missed. And what I mean by that is, and Shay, we always talk about that when we're working with clients, but there's a difference between family governance and business governance. And there are so many farm operations out here right now that are so sophisticated, so large, so opportunistic with where they could go and what the business would be able to do, assuming that the people in that business communicate effectively. They have a mindset of a infinite business as opposed to a finite. What I mean by that is clear communication, planning on the operation going on to multiple generations, and understanding what the business is going to need to move forward from a financial perspective, but then ultimately communicating that to those that are actively engaged and not actively engaged in the family as they transition into the next generation. And I think, when you ask about, what's the world going to look like in 10 years, it's going to look a lot different because there's a lot of operations that are not doing the due diligence with the transition planning that's necessary to create a legacy that is infinite as and that's one of the questions we've been starting to ask when we sit down in a transition is how do you view your business?
Mm.
Well, we want the legacy to go on. Well, if you want the legacy to go on, we're going to have some really hard conversations with family members on business governance and explain the business governance and explain, you know, how difficult or how impossible in a lot of cases it is to buy the farm again. The same family buying the farm over and over again is going to be impossible. So we have to figure out, okay, how do we transition over to the actively engaged and yet have the non-actively engaged members of the family understand that and buy into it? And I think those are difficult conversations, but those operations who figure that out are going to be the ones farming in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years.
I'd almost sum up what I heard from both of you guys with a simple statement of your legacy is dependent on the market, but the market doesn't give a shit about your legacy and those emotions. And so if you're not willing to make the long-term bets at the tough times informed by the right data and people structures like Shay was talking about to make that, kind of measured risk, and you don't have the human side structured, it doesn't matter what your feelings are. You're going to have to engage in just a fundamentally different way. And the other big just takeaway I had from listening to you guys is this isn't stuff that happens overnight. This isn't a quick fix. Like this sounds like deep compounding. I mean, relationships are compounding, but the capabilities and the decisions are compounding. Shay was talking about the impacts of 2020. I mean, think about what you're doing in 2015 or 2010. And so if you're thinking about that next gen, even if they're in high school right now, the decisions now will reverberate and probably a heck of a lot more than even 10 years ago they did, just given how much land is turning over and how much more volatile markets are today.
I think the people management part needs to be expounded too, because I haven't fully developed this thought, but as Chris was talking there, it's the operations we've worked with that have figured out the people management, everything else in their life has gotten easier. And I
Mm.
think maybe the nature there is the people that are driven, that have diversified businesses, that are willing to take risk, are maybe not as naturally in tuned from a people management side. Sometimes they are, and sometimes they aren't. It just depends on if they have that leadership trait. And if they don't have that leadership trait, then the people management side can be a tremendous pain in the ass for them as leaders. But when they figure out, like, hey, I need to get this right, and if it's not me, I need to get someone on the team that can do it the right way, their businesses have really excelled because they've been able to hire the right people. They've built out the culture. They've decided these are the core values of the business. This is what our mission is. They've shared that vision. And I think that's the other thing that we see a lot of the market does not give a shit about whether you're profitable. In fact, the market's forcing you into break even as the market does. And those that are able to take advantage of the opportunities when they exist are the ones that have the infrastructure and the processes and the people in the place that they need to be. So, and the other thing I was thinking about the other day from a people management standpoint is you have to learn a little bit about yourself and how you react to things, or what your leadership style is. So it starts out with, okay, what am I thinking? And then why am I thinking that? And then when I tell my employees something, how do they react to it? And then it gets to the point where as a leader, you can say, okay, I know what I'm thinking, why I'm thinking it. I know how they're going to react to it. So what do I do about how they react? You just kind
Shay, you were in the 75th Ranger Regiment. You're displaying an alarming amount of self-awareness. Are you okay?
that's
I don't know. I'm
crazy.
just a dumb leg, but I don't know. This is crazy, sir.
But it's it's really just that mindset outlook of you have to be 4 or 5 steps ahead of the organization. and anticipating their needs, not trying to dictate the outcome that you want, but just saying, okay, how are the people going to react to this? And then how do I manage around that effectively? So that's a lot to unpack there, but I would just encourage people to go back and think about that and say, okay, how do I think? Why do I think that? What do my employees think? And then how can I anticipate their, don't pigeonhole them into how you know they're going to react, but what are they going to think about this? And then how do I manage around it?
Can I expand on that just a minute too?
Would love it.
So I love everything Shay just said, 1,000%, 100,000% right. And I would just add to that is that when you self-reflect, and some people really have a hard time with this in terms of self-awareness, right? Because we have ego, insecurity, and control issues. All of us do. Those three emotions impact business significantly and personal lives and everything. But what I would say is, be self-aware, understand what you do well, understand what you don't do as well, understand what your core competencies are, and then ultimately understand that as your business grows, owners, and I think this is almost worth writing down, but owners don't have to be managers and managers don't have to be owners. And so just because you're an owner and you've been the meat and potatoes of the whole operation to this point, and you have this growth opportunity and you hate managing people, but you're really good at agronomy, or you're really good at marketing, or you're really good at the accounting, whatever it is, figure out those core competencies and delegate that other stuff off, even if it's a management level thing. I mean, I'm sitting here as proof of that. I've got currently right now Alyssa running the show. Eventually Shay will be my boss, and I can't wait. I mean, I want to grow the business, and the only way you grow the business is surround yourself with people that are smarter than you and that have different skill sets that enhance and change the business for the next level. And I think that's really a key thing, just to tack on kind of what Shay was saying.
I hope folks realize like this isn't unique to agriculture, but I think farmers may put it harder on themselves because of we'll call it the pioneer mindset and the homesteader mindset and just those expectations that have come from where we all grew up. Like if I look at a venture-backed CEO, you have fewer jobs and fewer functions that you need to do, yet the amount of support that you get and the expectation of support you get is so much higher. And I don't think folks, there's this vision of, what even in other industries, what these business leaders look like. And it's, the guy or gal who's giving orders and going doing it. And like, that is not it. And like for us to expect as farm operations they get bigger, they get more complex, and they're operating in a more competitive environment for just that solo person to be able to handle all that. Not only unhealthy, but it is going to be a losing strategy because you're not going to be able to learn and execute at the same level as, your competition that is going to do that.
Well, and
Yeah,
you can't make as good of decisions when you're trying to manage 10 different things as opposed to the three things that you should be focusing on. And I'm as guilty of anybody at that is like, yep, I'm going to do this and this and this and this and this. And I can work my ass off and I'll probably do all of them at 80%, which collectively seems like, well, 80% of 10 things is better than 100% of five things, but it's really not, because what are the five things that are, like Chris said, what's making you money in the business and what's not making you money in the business? And what ends up happening is you become like a juggler of what's the biggest crisis that I need to solve right now. And it's not 80% of 10 things, it's 100% of two things, 60% of four things, and 30% of the remainder, and no part of your business is probably doing as well as it should be. So I say that to commiserate with everybody that deals with that and has struggled with that mindset of it needs to rely on me. The pushback you're going to get here, Ben, is people are going to say, well, I can't find good people, or I'm in an area that I can't. Some of that can probably be outsourced, or the other thing you need to look at is, do you have to be doing all those things? I mean, Chris and I, we've worked with operations that downsizing was the best thing for their business. They became more profitable. They became more streamlined. They were able to handle that from a management perspective. So that's probably the other thing that when you think about the next 10 years is there's going to be a lot of strategic growth in acres, in business opportunities, in procedures and people management. There's probably going to be a lot of people that need to figure out how do we get really, really lean from different processes and procedures that allows us to capitalize from a sheer margin standpoint, so that they don't get totally burnout.
So I know I want to keep this at a reasonable length because I could ask you guys literally. I mean, you guys have been around me enough that you know that I will ask questions until you are just sick, but even more sick of seeing my face on that. And so, in terms of the tangible next steps that folks have, I don't think we're going to get to like the tangible opportunities area. Luckily, if you go to podcast, I think it was I have it written down 687. These guys did a really good podcast with their whole team on like just like opportunities and how to evaluate them and like what a bunch of those are in terms of like that near term. And we are in a down cycle. If you look at farmland prices, the data we have says flat to down 10% in most markets. We are personally at Fractal, we are expecting that to continue and generally every market's different, anywhere from 3 to another 5, 7%. That's a great time to get in as long as you're doing it in a disciplined way and growth actually adds to your business and doesn't subtract. So if that's
Mhm.
the opportunity side, great. What is a lot of what I heard from you guys are, hey, we need to get more efficient and we need to be able to build the processes, the human capital, all these that are we know are long-term journeys and building our own capabilities as leaders that exist. Where if I was somebody listening to this and a lot of what you guys said resonated, and I'm looking and I'm like, all right, I have a solid operation, but I want it to be more than solid. I want to have that legacy where it's going to be around, it's going to be that infinite legacy. And I want to engage, somebody from AgView or you guys, like, what would that even look like? What are we going to talk about? Like, just paint that picture and just make it a little bit more tangible for someone about, what are a couple of different options of how you guys work with them and how you could help their operation.
I guess I'll start. I can see Shay's wheels turning there, so but I'll go quick and just say that one of the things that we like to do is just start out with a conversation and find out what the needs of the business are. And sometimes just having that conversation, sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what your needs are until you start talking about what's working in the business, what's not working in the business. One of the things we ask our clients and make a point to specifically in the first meeting, so it's kind of giving it away, but is, what's your definition of growth?
Hmm.
Because growth is different for everyone, in terms of what that means to the business, what that means to the legacy, and what that means to the family and the employees and everything. So
So
it,
not just acres is what you're saying?
yeah, it's not just acres, but but it's lots of different things, right? It's family, it's quality of life, it's a deep, thing that we ask people to really truly think about. And then the other thing that I think we want to do once we understand somebody's needs is and deeply understand their needs is understand what are their expectations out of a service or out of working with whether it's us or Fractal or whoever. What are the expectations of that relationship? What and expectations go two ways. And one of the things that makes things not work sometimes is unmet expectations. And so I think by making those expectations really clear and saying what we can do and what we can't do, but also making sure that farmers all understand, because I see this with brokers all the time and marketing people. It's really easy to get pissed at a broker because he or she made that recommendation, or they thought the market was going to do this or do that, and then transfer of blame to others instead of being accountable for your own decisions. I think is making sure that when we meet with people is that they're going to have way more to do after we start working with them than they got right now, because we're going to help them identify gaps in the business. We're going to help them identify opportunities and challenges that need to be navigated. And we're going to create those action items, and then we're going to help them through those. But they have to be accountable for their own decisions, and they have to make that change or make that adjustment or take that opportunity or whatever, and their business will grow, and they've got partners beside them. And that's kind of how I'd leave it. I'll let Shay take it from there.
I'm a pretty direct person, but I've always taken the soft approach on the AgView side because we care so much. I mean, ultimately, that's what it is our team cares more than probably anybody else will about your operation. But since Ben has afforded me the opportunity here, I'm going to lean into it. The two areas, if someone is like, why should I work with AgView, is we are either going to challenge you or we're going to be confirmation police, and we're probably going to do both. So we're going to come in and be like, why are you doing this? Is this the right answer? I got a guy in Illinois that his soybeans are 20% more profitable than corn. I'm like, why the hell are you even growing corn? What's the point? Grow soybeans. Yeah, I know. And it's like he knows the answer, but on the flip side, a lot of it's confirmation of an outside source that you can trust that we work with, have worked with hundreds of operations here over the last decade that we have insight to things that work and things that don't work. And here's some areas to avoid. Those are the two things that can help elevate your business. And the other thing that I would say is on the wall behind, if you're watching, we have lovingly deemed it the AgView Nation, but really it's just the network and connections. And Ben, you've seen this play out in real life with our relationship. We've seen it we put on an executive business conference that I would encourage everybody listening to this to sign up for. It's in January every year. This year it's
Just after I do, because I almost got blocked out one year because it fills up fast. So just
yeah.
not go too fast.
We lovingly let Ben in, but
Once.
that's that's the network and the connections and like where the peer groups come into play. This last peer group that if I could put this producer's face on a poster and plaster it up everywhere, I probably would. He said I started working with Chris in 2012. And I felt that I was 20 years behind, and now I feel I'm 20 years ahead. He goes, I should have started working with you guys in 2000, and I would be 50 years ahead in my business because of the connections. He goes, all of the connections that I have made that have elevated my business have come through AgView. And it gives me goosebumps saying it because that wasn't anything I did. Most of it was Chris and what he started, but really it's just the people that we've been able to surround ourselves with. So that's my hard pitch that you'll probably never hear me give any other place. That's the value that comes from working with AgView, and we do care. We care more than probably anybody outside of your family and outside of your business about your success, and that's what we're here for.
I think that's a great place to wrap it up. I'm going to let Chris get the last word on this, but I will say you both deserve a couple stiff bourbons after this because I know how uncomfortable you both are on talking about yourselves normally. Chris, wrap us up. You're the one that started a lot of this.
Well, I think it comes down to the producers, though. I mean, they're passionate about what they do, and we're just blessed to get the opportunity to help them. And we view ourselves part of the farm. When we show up, we're just another team member in your business, and we're going to look at things with constructive criticism in the right way. We're going to try to help everybody with communication, which communication is always one of the number one issues. It always shows up. And we're going to be there to help make sure that the numbers add up and that we're making hopefully the right decisions with the right information. And really at the end of the day, the success comes from what the producers make for decisions from that. And we've just been blessed to get to work with really good operations. And that doesn't mean that every operation's called us up and had all their stuff figured out. A lot of times there's a mess. And we're not the ones that fix the mess. We're just the ones that help. So I got to give the credit to the producers of what they do because we've found a few of them where we've tried to help and they don't help themselves. They have to help themselves too. We can be there, but we can't do everything for you. We can help you and we're more than happy to help you. But I got to give the success to the producers and what they've done. That's really the key.
I think that's a great place to wrap. There's not just a lot that's changed in the industry, but there's also a ton of opportunity and being able to grab that and build that. And for that to be in family legacies is pretty damn cool. And I appreciate how much we was talking leadership about the give a shit factor. And it's pretty obvious you guys have it. So I appreciate you letting me goad you into asking you questions for once. Go grab your bourbons. You've earned them, gents.
Hey, thanks a lot, Ben. And thanks everyone for listening to, kind of this special episode of the AgView pitch. We're going to have some notes here in the show notes. Go check that out. Check out Fractal Ag, and we'll drop a link to the conference. But gentlemen, thank you so much for the time here today. And thank you everyone for listening to another episode of the AgView pitch. We will catch you next time.